She was betrayed, not by strangers, not by enemies, but by the people she trusted the most, her own family. And the worst part wasn't what they did. It was how quietly it happened. Not all at once, not in a single moment you could point to, but slowly, day by day, until everything she had was gone. In a quiet village, far from the noise of the world, there lived a girl named Tam. From the outside, her life looked simple, peaceful even, but inside that small house was a story no one ever saw. A story of silence, of endurance, of a girl who worked, suffered, and gave without ever being seen. There was a time when her life was warm. Her mother was kind. Her father loved her. For a while, she belonged. But life doesn't stay kind forever. Her mother was gone. Her father followed not long after. And with them, everything changed. Because sometimes, the deepest pain isn't being hurt. It's being forgotten. And Tam was slowly becoming invisible. But what no one knew was this. Some stories don't end in suffering. Some stories begin there. Tam had always been a gentle girl. Not loud, not demanding. The kind of person who spoke softly and felt things deeply. She lost her mother when she was still very young. Too young to understand what death really meant, but old enough to feel the emptiness it left behind. The house grew quieter after that. Colder. Like something important had been taken away and never returned. Her father tried to hold everything together. He cared for her the best he could. But life doesn't always give people enough time to heal. Eventually, he remarried. A new woman entered their home. And with her came a daughter named Cam. At first, nothing seemed unusual. The new mother smiled, spoke gently, acted as if she cared. Cam was playful, carefree, just like any other child. For a moment, it felt like things might get better, like the emptiness in the house might finally be filled. But some truths don't show themselves right away. They wait. They settle in quietly, until one day, they become impossible to ignore. Not long after, her father passed away, and just like that, Tam lost the last person who truly saw her. That was when everything changed. The kindness disappeared, the warmth faded, and the house that once felt like home became something else entirely. Tam was no longer treated like a daughter. She became someone to command, someone to control, someone who existed only to serve. And from that moment on, her life began to move in a direction she never chose, one that would slowly turn her world into something much darker than she had ever imagined. From that moment on, Tam's life was no longer her own. Every day began the same way. Before the first light touched the sky, she was already awake, not because she wanted to be, but because she had no choice. She carried water from distant wells, her steps heavy against the cold ground. She cooked every meal, carefully, quietly, yet never sat down to eat first. She cleaned every corner of the house, until there was nothing left to clean. And when the work was done, there was always more waiting. The days felt endless, the nights too short. Her body grew tired, but she kept going, because stopping was never an option. And while Tam worked, Cam lived a completely different life. She slept in. She laughed. She wandered outside without a care in the world.
No responsibilities, no expectations, no consequences.
Everything Tam carried, Cam never had to feel. But the hardest part wasn't the work. It was the way she was treated, the way her efforts were ignored, the way her presence barely mattered, the way her voice slowly disappeared from the house. At first, Tam tried harder, thinking maybe if she did everything perfectly, things would change. Maybe she would be seen. Maybe she would be treated differently. But nothing changed, because this was never about what she did. It was about how they chose to see her. And in their eyes, she was no longer family. just someone who existed to serve. And still, she endured, not because she was weak, but because somewhere deep inside, she still held on to something. A quiet strength, the kind that doesn't shout, the kind that doesn't fight back, but the kind that refuses to break. One morning, her stepmother called both girls over. Her voice was calm, almost too calm. "Go to the river," she said. "Catch as many fish as you can, and then after a brief pause, the one who brings back more will be rewarded." Tam didn't question it. She never did. She simply nodded and left. The river was quiet that day. The water moved slowly, reflecting the sky like nothing in the world could go wrong. Tam stepped into the water without hesitation. Careful, focused, patient. She worked the way she always did. Quietly, without complaint, fish by fish, her basket slowly began to fill. Time passed. The sun climbed higher. Her hands grew cold, her body tired. But she didn't stop, because for once, there was something at the end of her effort, a reward, something she rarely had. By midday, her basket was full, but Cam had done nothing. She had spent the morning wandering, picking flowers, watching the water, enjoying the warmth of the sun, without a single thought about the task, until she saw Tam's basket. And in that moment, something changed. She walked over slowly, her voice soft, almost friendly. "Sister, you've worked so hard." Tam looked up, surprised. "Your face is dirty," Cam continued. "If you go home like that, Mother will be upset."
Tam has tita.
Just for a second, but then she believed her, because that's who she was. Someone who trusted, even when she shouldn't have. She placed her basket down and stepped into the water. The cool surface rippled around her as she bent down, washing her face, letting the water run over her skin, trying for just a moment to feel something other than exhaustion. But behind her, something else was happening. Cam moved quickly, silently. She took the basket, dumped every fish into her own, and, without looking back, she left. By the time Tam returned, the river felt different, quieter, heavier. She walked toward the basket, slowly, and then she saw it, empty. For a moment, she didn't move, didn't speak, didn't even breathe. Her eyes searched the ground, as if the fish might somehow still be there, as if this was just a mistake. But it wasn't. The truth settled in, slow and heavy. She had been tricked. Again, everything she worked for, gone. And this time, it hurt more than before. Not because of the fish, but because of what it meant. The betrayal. The realization that no matter how kind she was, no matter how hard she worked, she would always be the one who lost. Her knees gave in slightly. Her hands tightened. And then the tears came. Quiet at first, then uncontrollable. She cried by the river, alone, with no one to hear her, no one to comfort her, just the sound of water, and the weight of a truth she could no longer ignore, that in this world, being good was not enough. Tam didn't know how long she sat there, by the river, crying. The world around her kept moving. The water flowed. The wind passed through the trees. But for her, everything felt still, because sometimes pain doesn't come all at once. It settles in slowly, quietly, until it becomes too heavy to carry. She wasn't just crying over the fish. She was crying over everything. The unfairness, the silence, the feeling that no matter what she did, it would never be enough. And then, a voice, soft, gentle, almost like it didn't belong to the world around her. "Why are you crying?" Tam looked up, her vision blurred with tears. An old man stood there, calm, kind, different from anyone she had ever known. She didn't question where he came from. She didn't ask how he knew. She simply told him everything. Every word, every pain, every moment she had been forced to endure. And for the first time, someone listened, truly listened. The old man didn't interrupt, didn't judge, didn't dismiss her feelings. When she finished, he smiled gently. "Look again," he said. Tam lowered her eyes, back to the empty basket. At first, she saw nothing, but then something moved. A small fish, barely visible, still alive. She blinked, unsure if it was real. "That is enough," the old man said softly. "Take it home." Tam looked at him, confused. "It's just one fish." He shook his head. "Not everything valuable looks like much at first." Then he continued, "Keep it in the well. Feed it every day. Care for it." His voice lowered slightly. "And remember, kindness is never wasted." Before she could respond, he was gone.
Just like that.
The river felt quiet again, but something had changed. Tam gently picked up the small fish, holding it carefully as if it were something fragile, something important, because for the first time in a long while, she didn't feel completely empty. That night, she placed the fish into the well behind the house, and the next day, she came back with food. She called softly, her voice almost a whisper, and the fish appeared. Day after day, she returned. No matter how tired she was, no matter how long her work lasted, she always came back.
She spoke to it,
Fed it, watched it swim in the quiet water. It didn't speak. It didn't change her situation. It didn't take away her pain. But somehow, it made things feel different, less heavy, less empty, because for the first time, she had something of her own, something no one else knew about, something no one could take away, or at least, that's what she believed. And in that small, hidden moment, a fragile kind of hope began to grow. Not loud, not overwhelming, but enough to keep her going, enough to remind her that even in a life filled with darkness, there could still be something, quietly holding on to the light. For a while, that small piece of hope stayed hidden, quiet, untouched. But nothing good in Tam's life ever lasted for long. Her stepmother began to notice. Something was different.
Tam still worked the same,
Still stayed silent, still obeyed every command. But there was something in her eyes now. Something softer, something calmer. And that was enough to raise suspicion. So she watched, carefully, quietly. And when she couldn't find the answer herself, she turned to Cam.
"Follow her," she said.
"Find out what she's hiding." Cam did, as she was told. And it didn't take long. She saw everything. The well, the fish, the way Tam spoke to it, as if it were the only thing in the world that understood her. That night, the secret was no longer a secret. The next morning, Tam was sent away, far from home, given work that would take all day. She didn't question it. She never did. And while she was gone, they went to the well. They called the fish, just as Tam did.
And it came,
Trusting, unaware. That was all it took. When Tam returned, something felt wrong. The air was too quiet. The space around the well, too still. She called softly.
once.
Then again. But nothing came. No movement. No sound. No answer. Her chest tightened. Her hands trembled. And then
She saw it.
a faint trace of red spreading across the water. She didn't scream, didn't run. She just stood there, frozen, because in that moment, she understood. The one thing she had left was gone, not taken by fate, not lost by chance,
Taken.
on purpose. And this time, the pain felt different,
Deeper.
heavier, because it wasn't just loss. It was the realization that even the smallest piece of happiness she held on to could be taken away, without warning, without mercy. And for the first time, Tam didn't cry right away. She just stood there, empty, as if something inside her had finally gone silent. For a long moment, Tam didn't move. She stood there beside the well, staring into the water that no longer held anything for her. No movement.
No quiet ripple.
No sign of the one small thing that had made her days feel bearable. And then, the silence broke her. Tears came, but not like before. Not loud, not desperate, just slow, heavy, and endless. Because this time, it wasn't just sadness. It was the feeling of losing the last piece of something that was hers. Something no one else knew about. Something no one else touched. Or so she thought. Why are you crying? The voice returned.
Soft.
Gentle.
Familiar.
Tam looked up, her eyes red, her face still wet with tears. The old man stood there again, calm as before, as if he had never truly left. She didn't need to explain this time. He already knew. They took it, she whispered. He nodded, not surprised, not angry, just understanding. Some things, he said slowly, are taken from us not because they are small, but because they matter. Tam lowered her gaze, her hands tightening slightly. Then what do I have left? She asked. For a moment, he didn't answer. Then he stepped closer. Go back to the well, he said softly. Look carefully. You will find what remains.
Tấm hestita.
But she listened. She always did. She returned to the well, kneeling slowly, her eyes searching the surface again. At first, there was nothing. But then, near the edge,
she saw them. Small, white,
fragile.
The bones.
All that was left. Her chest tightened. But this time, she didn't look away. Take them, the old man said behind her. Keep them safe. She gathered the bones carefully, holding them as if they could break with the slightest touch. What do I do with them? She asked quietly. Bury them, he replied. Some things do not end the way we think they do. There was something in his voice, something calm.
Certain.
Not hope in the loud, obvious sense, but something deeper, something steady. That night, Tam returned to her small corner of the house. When no one was watching, she dug a small hole beneath her bed and placed the bones inside, carefully,
gently,
as if she were protecting something still alive. When she finished, she covered them, smoothed the ground, and sat there in silence. Nothing had changed. The house was still cold. The work would still be waiting for her in the morning. But somewhere deep inside, something shifted. Not happiness, not relief, but a quiet feeling she couldn't fully explain. As if what had been taken from her was not truly gone. As if something unseen was still waiting. And for the first time since the loss, Tam closed her eyes, not in exhaustion, but in something closer to trust. Because sometimes, hope doesn't return all at once. Sometimes, it comes back quietly, hidden in what remains, waiting for the right moment to rise again. Not long after, the entire village began to change. There was excitement in the air. Voices carried farther. Laughter came more easily, because the king had announced a festival, a grand celebration, one that only happened once in a long while. Everyone was going, preparing their best clothes, talking about the music, the lights, the chance to be seen. And for a moment, Tam allowed herself to feel something she hadn't felt in a long time. She wanted to go, not for the festival itself, but for the feeling of being part of something, of not being left behind. But hope, for her, never came easily. When her stepmother saw her, she smiled, that same quiet, calculated smile. If you want to go, she said, then finish this first. She poured out a large basket, rice mixed with sand. Separate every grain, she continued, and then you may go.
Tam looked down.
She knew there was no way to finish it in time. This wasn't a task. It was a trap. Still, she sat down, her hands moving slowly,
Trying.
even when she knew it was impossible. And then, something unexpected happened. A flutter of wings.
Birds. Dozens of them.
Landing around her. Without hesitation, they began to help, picking up the grains, separating them, one by one, faster than she ever could. Tam sat still, watching, almost afraid to believe it. And in what felt like no time at all, the work was done, perfectly. For the first time, the impossible had become possible. But when she stood up, ready to leave,
She stopped.
she had nothing to wear. Her clothes were worn, simple, unseen. And once again, that familiar weight returned. Until, look beneath what you buried. The voice.
Calm. Steady.
She followed it, digging beneath her bed, where the bones had been placed. And there, she found something else. Not bones, but beauty.
Fine clothes.
Soft fabric, delicate shoes. Things she had never owned, never even imagined. With hesitant hands, she changed. And when she stepped outside, something felt different. Not just in how she looked, but in how she carried herself. For the first time, she wasn't invisible. She was seen. And as she walked toward the festival, the world around her seemed to shift, as if everything she had endured had quietly led her to this moment. When Tam arrived at the festival, everything seemed to pause. The lights, the music, the voices in the crowd. For a brief moment, it all faded into the background, because people noticed her. Not just a glance, but real attention. Heads turned, whispers spread, eyes followed her as she moved through the crowd. She wasn't trying to stand out. She wasn't asking to be seen. But somehow,
She was.
for the first time in her life, she wasn't invisible. And yet, that feeling didn't last long, because deep inside, she still carried the weight of where she came from. And as quickly as she arrived, she felt the need to leave. So she turned and began to run through the crowd, past the lights, away from the moment she wasn't sure she deserved. And then it happened. One of her shoes slipped, falling softly onto the ground behind her. But she didn't stop. She didn't look back, because some part of her still believed this moment wasn't meant to last. Not for someone like her.
Moments late.
The royal procession passed through. The king's attention was drawn to something on the ground.
The shoe.
Simple, yet unlike anything he had seen. He picked it up slowly,
Studying it.
and in that quiet moment, a decision was made. Find her, he said, not out of curiosity, but certainty, because something about that single, forgotten shoe felt like the beginning of something much bigger. The search didn't take long. Word spread quickly across the kingdom. A single shoe and a single command. Whoever fits this shoe will be chosen. Women from every corner came forward, dressed in their finest, hopeful, confident. One by one, they tried, but none of them fit. The shoe was too small, too delicate, too precise. It wasn't meant for just anyone. And then, Tam stepped forward.
She didn't speak.
Didn't push through the crowd. Didn't try to be noticed. She simply stood there, quiet,
Calm.
as if she already knew. When the shoe was placed before her, there was a brief pause, a silence that felt heavier than all the noise before. Then, she slipped her foot inside.
Perfect.
No force,
No adjustment.
as if it had always belonged to her. The crowd fell silent, and in that moment, everything changed. The girl who had been overlooked, ignored, forgotten, was now seen, not as a servant, not as someone beneath others, but as someone chosen. The king didn't hesitate. He recognized something beyond appearance, something deeper. And just like that, Tam was brought to the palace. The life she once knew faded behind her. The long days of labor, the silence, the invisibility, all replaced by something entirely different.
Light.
Recognition. A place where she finally belonged. But peace
Didn't last.
it never did. Far from the palace, in a place Tam once called home, something darker was growing. Jealousy. It didn't fade with time. It didn't disappear when Tam left. It stayed, quiet, waiting. Her stepmother and Cam had heard the news. The girl they once ignored, the one they had treated like nothing, was now queen. And that truth was something they could not accept. So they waited. And when the moment came, they acted. One day, Tam returned home, not out of obligation, but out of memory, to honor her father. For a brief moment, everything seemed calm. Her stepmother smiled, spoke gently, acted as if nothing had ever happened.
But Tam didn't see it. She still believed.
Still trusted. Climb the tree, her stepmother said softly. There's something we need from the top. Tam didn't hesitate. She never did. She stepped forward, climbing slowly, carefully, higher and higher, until she reached the top. And then the sound, sharp, sudden. The trunk beneath her shifted. Her stepmother stood below, a blade in her hand, and without a second thought, she struck. The tree cracked. Time seemed to stop. And then it gave way. Tam fell. No warning. No chance to hold on. Just a single moment, and everything was gone. Silence followed.
Cold.
Empty. As if the world itself had paused. And, in that silence, the truth became undeniable. This wasn't cruelty born from anger. It was something deeper. Something chosen. The final act of a hatred that had been growing all along. And just like that, the girl who had endured everything
Was gone.
But her story didn't end with her fall, because Tam didn't disappear. She returned, first as a golden bird. It flew back to the palace and perched near the king. Every morning, it called out softly, "My king, do you still remember me?" The king paused. There was something in that voice, something he couldn't explain. "I don't know why," he said quietly, "but you feel familiar." But Cam heard it too, and fear quickly turned into anger. "It's just a bird," she said coldly. "Why keep it?" Soon after, the bird was killed, silenced once again.
But even that wasn't the end.
From its remains, a tree grew, tall and quiet. When the wind passed through its leaves, it whispered, "I am still here." The king would often rest beneath it, feeling a strange sense of peace. But one day, Cam ordered it cut down. "This tree gives me chills," she said. "Get rid of it." The wood was turned into a loom, and as the threads moved, a voice echoed softly, "Weave gently. Do you not remember who I am?"
Come froze.
Fear filled her eyes. "Burn it," she said immediately. "Burn it all." The loom was destroyed, reduced to ash, and still, Tam remained. From those ashes, a single fruit appeared.
Small.
Silent, waiting. One day, it was taken in by an old woman. "Strange fruit," she murmured. "I'll keep it." That night, the fruit split open, and from within it, Tam stepped out, whole,
Alive.
Days later, the king arrived. He saw her, and everything became clear. "It's you," he whispered. Tam looked at him gently. "I never left," she said. And in that moment, the story that was once broken finally became whole again. The truth could no longer be hidden. Everything was revealed, not through anger, not through revenge, but through what remained undeniable. Tam stood before the king, not as a shadow, not as a memory, but as the truth itself. And this time, no one could take that away from her. The king listened to every word, Every moment she had endured, every life she had lived just to return, there was no doubt.
No hesitation.
Justice must be done, he said firmly.
Kam stod frozen.
Her confidence gone, her voice silent. What you did, the king continued, cannot be undone. And for the first time, she had nothing to say. The stepmother and Cam were cast out, removed from the life they had tried to control, left to face the consequences of their own actions. No power, no protection, no place to hide. And Tam returned to the palace, not as someone who was chosen by chance, but as someone who had earned her place through everything she survived. The silence that once surrounded her
was gone.
In its place was recognition, respect, a life that was finally her own. And for the first time, everything felt still, not empty, but peaceful. This story was never just about a girl. It was about something deeper. Because in real life, kind people often suffer the most.
They give.
They endure. They stay silent, even when they're treated unfairly. And for a while, it may seem like they lose, like the world rewards those who take
and ignores those who give.
But that's not the whole truth. Because kindness is not weakness. It doesn't disappear. It doesn't lose its value. It waits. And sooner or later, it rises. Just like Tam did. And those who choose cruelty, who hurt others to get ahead, may win for a moment, but never forever. Because every action carries a consequence. And in the end, they face it. So the lesson is simple. Be kind, but don't stay invisible. Endure, but don't forget your worth. Because being good is powerful, but only when you choose
to rise.
And if this story stayed with you, if even a small part of it felt real, then you already understand something most people don't. Some stories aren't just meant to be heard, they're meant to be felt. And there are many more stories like this. Stories about life, about people, about the quiet battles no one talks about. So, if you want to hear more, take a second and subscribe to the channel, because the next story might be the one that changes how you see everything. And trust me, you don't want to miss it.